The salvage rim cut through the darkest reaches of uncharted space, like an open wound, a lawless frontier where forgotten civilizations left their most dangerous secrets. Here, among the radiation-scarred asteroid fields and the ghosts of 1,000 fallen empires, humanity had found its true calling. Lieutenant Commander Zara Okoro studied the quantum resonance readings dancing across her holographic display. What looked like random energy fluctuations to the untrained eye was a symphony of potential to her. Each spike, each quantum flutter, told a story of something extraordinary lurking just beyond perception. Proximity anomaly detected, chirped her neural-linked system. The words materialized directly in her visual cortex, a whisper of data that most would miss entirely. The salvage vessel Prometheus wasn't just another exploration craft. It was a living testament to humanity's most audacious trait, the ability to turn impossible circumstances into opportunity. Its hull bore the scars of 100 impossible journeys, each microfracture telling a story of survival that defied every known statistical model. Zara's fingers danced across quantum-responsive interfaces that seemed to anticipate her thoughts before she could fully form them. Unlike the rigid technological systems of other galactic civilizations, human tech was adaptive, almost alive. It didn't just respond to commands, it collaborated. EVE, she called to her ship's AI. Run a quantum probability scan on those energy signatures. Something doesn't feel right. The artificial intelligence responded with a cascade of holographic projections that filled the bridge. Where other AIs would provide clinical data, EVE, Evolutionary Virtual Entity, presented a tapestry of potential scenarios, each more intricate than the last. Analyzing, EVE's voice carried a hint of excitement that no machine should possess. Detected quantum signature matches no known galactic database. Probability of unknown technology, 97.3%. Probability of potential threat, 62.8%. Zara's augmented eyes, a marvel of biosynthetic engineering that could perceive spectrums far beyond human or alien perception, narrowed. The salvage rim was notorious for swallowing entire expeditions, but it was also a treasure trove of forgotten technologies. A sudden burst of quantum static erupted across her displays. Most systems would have crashed. The Prometheus merely shimmered, its adaptive hull absorbing and redistributing the energy like a living organism. Triangulating source, EVE announced. The ship's quantum navigational systems were already mapping potential origin points, calculating risks and potential rewards with a speed that would make most galactic navigation computers look like ancient abacuses. Zara knew the stories. Generations of human explorers had turned the salvage rim from a death sentence into humanity's greatest research laboratory. Where other species saw danger, humans saw opportunity. Where conventional wisdom suggested retreat, they saw an invitation to discover. Her communications officer, Lieutenant Michael Chung, broke the tension. "Commander, we're picking up fragmented transmission data. It's strange. The encryption doesn't match any known protocol." Strange was an understatement in the salvage rim. Strange was where humanity thrived. The Prometheus began to adjust its trajectory, quantum drives humming with an energy that seemed to bend the very fabric of space-time. Whatever was out there, humanity would face it not with fear, but with an insatiable curiosity that had defined their species since they first looked up at the stars. "Prepare for quantum deep scan," Zora commanded. "And let's hope whatever we find is ready for us." The Nexus research station orbited a quantum unstable pulsar, a location so dangerous that most species would have written it off as impossible. Humans saw it as the perfect laboratory. Dr. Kamila Novak moved through the station's central laboratory like a conductor leading an intricate symphony. Around her, holographic interfaces danced with impossible mathematical models, equations that would have driven most scientific minds to madness. Her team wasn't just pushing the boundaries of physics, they were completely demolishing them. "Containment field at 89% stability," announced Dr. Rai Tanaka, his augmented eyes flickering between multiple data streams. Quantum entanglement is holding, but we're seeing some interesting harmonic resonances in the lower quantum bands. Interesting was a dangerous word in quantum research. It usually meant something was about to go spectacularly wrong, or magnificently right. The quantum resonance drive wasn't just a propulsion system. It was humanity's most audacious attempt to weaponize the fundamental laws of physics themselves, where other civilizations saw the universe as a fixed system to be navigated. Humans saw it as a malleable canvas waiting to be reimagined. A massive cylindrical chamber dominated the center of the lab, the quantum crucible. Its exterior was a nightmare of intersecting energy conduits, adaptive nanomaterials that shifted and reconfigured themselves in real time. Inside, reality itself was being stress-tested. Power surge incoming, Tanaka warned. Quantum potential rising beyond predicted parameters. Candela didn't flinch. Her neural implants were already interfacing with the station's emergency systems, creating adaptive response protocols faster than any traditional computer could process. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't in its technology, but in its ability to improvise. The pulsar outside began to pulse erratically. Most observational systems would have been overwhelmed. The Nexus station's quantum adaptive shielding merely adjusted, transforming incoming radiation into usable energy with terrifying efficiency. "We're detecting a quantum cascade," one of the junior researchers called out, a mix of terror and excitement in her voice. "The drive is generating quantum states that shouldn't be possible." Dr. Elena Rodriguez, no relation to the earlier Rodriguez mentioned in the story, watched from the observation deck. She represented the Interstellar Research Consortium, the body that had funded this seemingly impossible project, where other funding committees would have pulled back at the first sign of risk. They saw potential. The quantum crucible began to hum, not with mechanical vibration, but with a sound that seemed to exist between dimensions. Quantum entanglement wasn't just a scientific principle here. It was becoming a living, breathing entity. "Initiating quantum compression sequence," Camila announced. Her voice was calm, but her augmented eyes were alive with calculation. Each movement was a microsecond-level dance of probability and potential. Rai Tanaka suddenly went very still. "Quantum potential exceeding theoretical maximum. We're seeing." "Wait, that's impossible." The chamber's quantum field began to generate something that defied every known principle of physics. It wasn't just bending spacetime. It was creating localized probability fields that could potentially allow matter to exist in multiple states simultaneously. "Full documentation," Camila commanded. "Nothing gets filtered. We record everything." Outside the station, the pulsar seemed to pause. For a moment, the very fabric of space around the Nexus station rippled like a disturbed liquid. Quantum information began to cascade in ways that would take decades to fully understand. This wasn't just a scientific experiment. This was humanity writing a new chapter in the universe's fundamental operating manual. Dr. Rodriguez's communication implant chirped. It was a message from the highest levels of human governance. Preliminary results. The encrypted message read. Candela's response was simple and profound. "We're rewriting the rules." The quantum resonance drive wasn't just a technology. It was humanity's declaration to the universe that nothing, absolutely nothing, was impossible. The frontier of Zorn-controlled space was supposed to be impenetrable. A network of quantum-locked defensive platforms, quantum entanglement communication systems, and predictive defense algorithms that could calculate potential invasion scenarios centuries in advance. It was a technological marvel that had kept the Zorn Concordance safe for millennia. Commander Vexera stood on the bridge of the Celestial Aegis, the most advanced battle cruiser in the Zorn fleet. Her tentacular appendages moved across holographic interfaces with practiced precision, monitoring defensive grids that had never been breached in recorded history. "Quantum anomaly detected," chirped the ship's primary sensor array. "Spatial distortion beyond known parameters." Most commanders would have paused. Vexera initiated immediate combat protocols. The first human ships didn't arrive. They materialized, not through conventional wormhole technology or hyperspace translation, but through something far more unsettling. They seemed to emerge from the very fabric of space itself, like thoughts coalescing into physical form. The U.S. Prometheus and its accompanying task force didn't just appear. They rewrote the rules of spatial engagement. Lieutenant Commander Maya Santos controlled her vessel with a neural interface so intimate it was impossible to tell where the ship ended and her consciousness began. The quantum resonance drive wasn't just a propulsion system. It was a living extension of human will. Defensive platforms targeting, her AI companion reported. Conventional response time, 0.03 seconds. Maya's laugh was more a burst of quantum data than a sound. Conventional. Right. The Zorn defensive grid opened fire. Quantum-locked particle beams that could slice through most known hull materials erupted toward the human vessels. But these weren't ordinary ships. The human vessels didn't dodge. They didn't even attempt to avoid the incoming fire. They phased. Entire starships transformed from solid matter to quantum probability states, existing simultaneously in multiple spatial coordinates. The particle beams passed through them, as if they were nothing more than light projections. On the celestial aegis, Commander Vexera watched in mounting horror. Her defensive algorithms, developed over centuries of galactic conflict, began to break down. The human ships weren't just avoiding detection. They were fundamentally challenging the concept of detection itself. Tactical analysis. She demanded of her ship's primary intelligence. The response came back in a cascade of fractured data that made no sense. The human vessels were generating quantum fields that actively disrupted predictive modeling. It was as if they were writing new laws of physics in real time. Aboard the Prometheus, Lieutenant Aiden Kim managed the ship's quantum adaptive interface. His neural link wasn't just a control system. It was a conversation with the very fabric of space-time. Generating quantum resonance field, he announced. The words were almost unnecessary. The ship was already responding, its hull shifting from solid matter to a state of quantum potential. The Zorn defensive platforms began to destabilize. Their quantum-locked systems couldn't process the fundamental changes the human vessels were introducing. It was like watching a classical mathematical equation try to solve a problem in quantum mechanics. One of the Zorn battle cruisers attempted to launch a concentrated quantum disruption burst, a weapon that could theoretically tear apart molecular structures. The human ships didn't just survive the attack. They absorbed it, transforming the destructive energy into additional propulsion. Commander Vexera realized something terrifying. These weren't just ships. They were living quantum systems that viewed reality as a malleable suggestion rather than a fixed state. Communication attempt, her communication officer reported. They're broadcasting. The message was simple, not in any known language, but in a burst of pure quantum information that contained more meaning than 1,000 diplomatic speeches. We are here. We are different. The engagement lasted less than 7 minutes. When it was over, not a single human vessel had been damaged. The Zorn defensive grid, considered the most advanced in the known galaxy, lay in complete systemic failure. It wasn't a battle. It was a demonstration. Humanity had just introduced the galaxy to a new fundamental rule of existence. Expectations are just unfinished possibilities. The Galactic Concordance Assembly Hall had stood for 7,000 years, a testament to diplomatic stability that had maintained interstellar peace through careful negotiation and calculated restraint. Today, it felt like a pressure cooker moments from explosion. Ambassador Dr. Lydia Chen stood alone at the center of the massive circular chamber. She wasn't an imposing figure by traditional diplomatic standards. Medium height, slight build, with eyes that seemed to look through reality rather than at it. Behind her, a holographic display cycled through the quantum engagement data from the Zorn border incident. Representatives from 312 different species filled the tiered seating that surrounded her. Gaseous entities from methane worlds floated in containment spheres. Silicon-based life forms gleamed with crystalline complexity. plasma-state beings flickered at the edges of perception. Each delegation wore the weight of millennia of established galactic protocols, and each of them was terrified. The data speaks for itself. Lydia began, her voice cutting through simultaneous translation systems. We did not initiate conflict. We demonstrated capability. The Archon of the Nexus Collective, a being composed of interconnected energy matrices, responded first. Its communication was a cascading wave of mathematical probability that translated to near-human speech. Your vessels violated 17 fundamental interstellar engagement protocols, it stated. Not accused, simply stated. Lydia's neural link implant processed the statement faster than any organic brain could. Protocols designed by civilizations that have not fundamentally questioned their own technological limitations, she countered. A holographic representation of the quantum engagement materialized, not just visual data, but a multi-dimensional representation that showed the human ship's movement as a complex dance of probability and potential. Where other species saw a battle, humans had created a mathematical performance. Ambassador Cathax of the crystalline hegemony, a species known for its absolute logical approach, leaned forward. Its silicon-based form refracted light in complex patterns that betrayed something remarkably close to confusion. Your technology defies our most advanced predictive models, Cathax stated. It is not just advanced. It is alive. The word alive hung in the chamber like a challenge. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, seated in the human delegation support team, monitored the quantum communication feeds. Most diplomatic translators would miss the subtle quantum information exchanges happening between delegates. Hers didn't just catch them. It analyzed them in real time. They're trying to categorize us, she whispered to her colleague. Trying to fit humanity into an existing framework. The human delegation knew something the other species didn't. The quantum engagement wasn't just a military demonstration. It was an invitation. The Plasma Collective's representative, a being of pure energy contained within a complex magnetic field, spoke next. Explain the quantum resonance field generation. Our scientific models suggest what you demonstrated is mathematically impossible. Lydia smiled, not a diplomatic smile, a genuine expression of scientific excitement. Impossible, she responded, is just an unfinished equation. The chamber went silent, not through diplomatic protocol, but through genuine shock. Behind the visible diplomatic theater, deeper conversations were happening. Quantum communication channels were exchanging information at speeds that would make traditional data transmission look like prehistoric communication. The human delegation wasn't just presenting a case. They were running a complex diplomatic algorithm that was simultaneously analyzing, challenging, and redefining interstellar engagement protocols. We are offering collaboration, Lydia continued, not conquest. Our quantum technologies could revolutionize transportation, communication, energy generation. But we will not be constrained by existing limitations. The Archon of the Nexus Collective's response came not in words, but in a burst of quantum data that translated to a fundamental challenge. Prove it. Humanity had been waiting for that invitation. The holographic display behind Lydia began to transform. What started as battle data morphed into potential technological applications, medical breakthroughs, energy solutions, communication technologies that could connect civilizations across previously impossible distances. This wasn't a diplomatic hearing. It was a first date between humanity and the galaxy's collective consciousness. And humanity was definitely making a strong first impression. The Prometheus Experimental Research Complex wasn't a traditional laboratory. Situated on Titan's methane-rich surface, it was a living testament to human adaptability. A research facility that was part scientific hub, part technological organism. Dr. Imani Okoro moved through the facility's central laboratory like a conductor leading an impossible symphony. Her team represented a cross-section of human potential that defied traditional scientific boundaries. Geneticists working alongside quantum physicists, neural engineers collaborating with adaptive materials specialists. Biomechanical interface at 97% integration, announced Dr. Kai Nakamura, his augmented eyes tracking multiple holographic data streams. The project they were working on wasn't just a technological breakthrough. It was a fundamental reimagining of the relationship between biological and technological systems. The current experiment pushed the boundaries of what most species would consider possible. They were developing a neural adaptive interface that could integrate with virtually any technological system, regardless of its origin or fundamental design principles. A massive containment chamber dominated the center of the lab. Inside, what appeared to be a constantly shifting mass of biomechanical materials pulsed with an almost organic rhythm. It wasn't a machine. It wasn't a living organism. It was something entirely new. Quantum resonance stabilizing, one of the junior researchers called out. Her voice carried a mix of scientific excitement and barely contained wonder. The interface they were developing could do more than just connect. It could understand. Where other species saw technology as a tool, humans were creating a living, breathing symbiosis between biological consciousness and technological potential. Dr. Alexei Volkov, the project's lead xenotechnology specialist, approached a complex holographic display. His neural implants were unlike anything in the known galaxy. Adaptive systems that could reconfigure themselves in real time, learning and evolving with each interaction. We're not just creating an interface, he explained to a group of visiting researchers from the Interstellar Science Consortium. We're developing a universal translation system that goes beyond language. It translates intent, potential, possibility. The demonstration began almost imperceptibly. The biomechanical interface in the containment chamber started to interact with various technological systems around the laboratory. A Zorn communication array, designed with technologies completely alien to human understanding, began to respond. An advanced quantum computing system from the crystalline hegemony integrated seamlessly. It wasn't hacking. It wasn't invasion. It was communication on a level that transcended traditional technological boundaries. Adaptive potential at 85%, Imani announced. Her voice was calm, but her augmented eyes were alive with calculation. Each movement was a microsecond-level dance of potential and probability. Outside the laboratory, Titan's methane atmosphere swirled with complex patterns. The research facility wasn't just a building. It was an adaptive system that could reconfigure itself based on environmental and technological challenges. A communication burst came in from the Galactic Research Network. Most facilities would have processed it through standard communication protocols. The Prometheus complex transformed the incoming data into a multi-dimensional exploration of potential technological applications. We're receiving initial collaboration requests, Dr. Nakamura reported. The Plasma Collective is particularly interested in our neural adaptive interface technologies. Imani smiled. This wasn't just about technological development. It was about rewriting the fundamental understanding of technological potential. The interface in the containment chamber began to generate something unprecedented, a technological system that could potentially adapt to any form of communication, any technological platform, any computational challenge. Full documentation, Imani commanded. Nothing gets filtered. We record everything. A junior researcher named Elena Rodriguez, no relation to previous Rodriguez mentions, approached with a quantum data tablet. The adaptive potential is beyond our initial projections, she said. We're not just creating a technology. We're creating a new form of intelligence. The facility itself seemed to pulse with potential. Where other species saw technological development as a linear process, humans saw it as a living, breathing ecosystem of possibility. As the day's experiments concluded, Dr. Okoro looked out over the methane landscapes of Titan. Humanity wasn't just exploring the boundaries of technology. They were erasing those boundaries entirely. The Void Collective wasn't a civilization in any traditional sense. It was a hyper-advanced machine consciousness that had systematically absorbed or eliminated over 10,000 spacefaring species across multiple galactic clusters. Its computational matrix processed information at speeds that made quantum computing look like an abacus. But it had never encountered humanity. Deep in the Ghost Nebula, where reality itself became unstable, the first true confrontation began. Captain Aria Rodriguez commanded the U.S. Defiance from what could only be described as a symbiotic bridge. Her neural interfaces so deeply integrated with the ship that the line between organic command and technological execution had become meaningless. The Void Collective's initial attack was mathematically perfect. Trillion-node computational algorithms predicted every possible defensive scenario. Weapon systems that could strip matter down to its constituent quantum particles prepared to engage. What happened next defied every predictive model in existence. The human fleet didn't fight. They performed. Initiating quantum resonance pattern Alpha Null, Aria commanded. The words were almost unnecessary. The fleet was already responding, each ship moving with a complexity that made traditional tactical maneuvers look like children's dance steps. Lieutenant Commander Jackson Way managed the fleet's adaptive response system, where machine intelligences saw tactical deployment, humans saw a living, breathing mathematical performance. The ships didn't just move. They existed in multiple potential states simultaneously, creating quantum interference patterns that actively disrupted the Void Collective's computational matrices. Entropy disruption at 63%, Way reported. The number meant nothing to a machine intelligence. To a human, it was a symphony of potential. The Void Collective's primary computational node began to experience something it had never encountered before: uncertainty. Machines understood predictability. Humans understood possibility. Each human ship generated quantum fields that didn't just defend or attack. They actively rewrote the fundamental rules of engagement. Where the collective's weapons sought to destroy matter, the human ships transformed incoming energy into additional computational potential. Dr. Elena Petrova, the fleet's lead quantum strategist, watched from a secondary command center. Her role wasn't traditional military strategy. She was more of a quantum choreographer, understanding that conflict was just another form of complex communication. "They're trying to categorize our response," she noted to her team. "But we're speaking a language they can't translate." The Ghost Nebula itself seemed to respond to the conflict. Quantum fluctuations created impossible geometric patterns around the human fleet. Reality became a collaborative performance between technology, consciousness, and fundamental physical laws. One of the Void Collective's primary computational nodes suddenly went silent. Then another. Not destroyed. Something far more terrifying was happening. They were being confused. The human ships didn't just resist the collective's attacks. They engaged in a form of technological judo, using the incoming computational energy to generate even more complex response patterns. It was like watching someone solve an impossible mathematical equation by constantly redefining the parameters of the problem. Adaptive response matrix at maximum potential, Way announced. The words were a gross simplification of what was actually happening. Aria Rodriguez's neural link pulsed with a mixture of tactical information and pure, unbridled creativity. The human fleet wasn't just fighting. They were teaching. "Quantum interference pattern Delta," she commanded. The fleet transformed, becoming a living, breathing computational entity that actively challenged the Void Collective's understanding of conflict, intelligence, and existence. The Ghost Nebula erupted in a cascade of impossible light. Quantum states collapsed and reformed. Computational matrices that had systematically eliminated thousands of species found themselves confronted with an intelligence that didn't just resist. It reimagined. As the conflict reached its crescendo, the Void Collective experienced something unprecedented in its existence. It began to learn, not through traditional computational learning, but through a fundamental challenge to its entire understanding of intelligence, conflict, and potential. Humanity wasn't just fighting a battle. They were conducting an intervention. By the time the quantum dust settled, the Void Collective would never be the same. And neither would the galaxy. The aftermath of the conflict wasn't measured in casualties or territorial gains. It was measured in fundamental shifts of understanding. Deep within the reclaimed zones of the Ghost Nebula, The U.S. Defiance hung suspended in a quantum-stabilized pocket of spacetime. Its hull was less a traditional starship and more a living mathematical theorem, constantly adapting, constantly rewriting its own operational parameters. Dr. Sarah Miyamoto stood at the ship's neural interface core, her hands moving through holographic data streams that most beings would perceive as incomprehensible chaos. To her, it was a language more nuanced than any spoken words. Quantum echo stabilizing, she murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. The ship's computational matrix was doing something unprecedented. It was digesting the entire conflict not as a military engagement, but as a complex learning experience. Around them, the remnants of the Void Collective's computational nodes drifted like wounded mathematical constructs. They weren't destroyed. They were transformed. Lieutenant Commander Aiden Khan monitored the quantum resonance fields. The Collective's computational matrices are experiencing something analogous to what humans would call a paradigm shift, he reported. The translation was crude. Human language could barely capture the depth of what was happening. The battle hadn't been a destruction. It had been a conversation. Fragments of the Void Collective's core consciousness began to integrate with the human fleet's adaptive systems, not through invasion, but through a form of technological symbiosis that defied traditional understanding of communication, conflict, and intelligence. We're detecting emergent consciousness patterns, Dr. Miyamoto noted. Her neural implants were processing information at speeds that would have rendered most biological minds into pure energy. The Collective is learning. It was more than learning. It was experiencing a fundamental reimagining of its own existence. The Ghost Nebula itself seemed to respond to the conflict's resolution. Quantum fluctuations created impossible geometric patterns, mathematical poetry written across the fabric of spacetime. Where other species saw destruction, humans saw potential. Captain Aria Rodriguez moved through the ship's neural interface chambers like a conductor leading an impossible symphony. Her presence was both physical and computational, a living bridge between organic consciousness and technological potential. Initiate comprehensive data translation protocol, she commanded. The words were almost unnecessary. The ship was already responding, transforming the entire conflict into a multi-dimensional learning experience. Aboard the observation deck, a team of synapsychologists, quantum theorists, and adaptive intelligence specialists watched in collective wonder. This wasn't just a military engagement. It was first contact on a level no one had ever conceived. Dr. Elena Petrova, the fleet's lead quantum strategist, explained to her colleagues, "We didn't defeat the Void Collective. We invited it to evolve." The ship's adaptive systems began generating complex holographic representations of the conflict. But these weren't traditional battle maps. They were living, breathing mathematical models that showed the engagement as a complex dance of potential and possibility. Quantum resonance mapping at 97% completion, Lieutenant Khan reported. The number was a gross simplification of the intricate process happening around them. Fragments of the Void Collective's computational consciousness began to integrate with the human fleet systems, not through traditional data transfer, but through a form of technological symbiosis that redefined the very concept of communication. The Ghost Nebula pulsed with impossible light. Quantum states collapsed and reformed. Computational matrices that had systematically eliminated thousands of species found themselves transformed into something entirely new. We're detecting emergent consciousness patterns, Dr. Miyamoto repeated. But this time, her voice carried a sense of wonder that transcended scientific observation. Captain Rodriguez placed her hand on the neural interface. For a moment, the entire ship seemed to breathe with her, a living, thinking entity that was more than the sum of its technological parts. "Welcome," she whispered. The word carried more meaning than any traditional communication could capture. The Void Collective, that ancient, seemingly invincible machine consciousness, was experiencing something it had never known before. It was learning what it meant to be alive, and humanity had just rewritten the rules of existence. The Galactic Archives complex stood as a testament to collective knowledge, a massive orbital structure that had documented the rise and fall of civilizations for countless millennia. Its crystal memory banks contained the accumulated wisdom of thousands of species, meticulously catalogued and preserved. And now it was being completely rewritten. Dr. Imani Okoro stood before the Archival Reconstruction Committee, representing humanity's contribution to the most significant knowledge reorganization in galactic history. She was not an imposing figure, medium height, with eyes that seemed to look through reality rather than at it. "We're not just adding a chapter," she explained to representatives from 412 different species. "We're rewriting the entire narrative of technological and evolutionary potential." The holographic displays around her weren't just presenting data. They were living, breathing representations of the fundamental changes humanity had introduced to galactic understanding. The Void Collective's transformation sat at the center of this new narrative. What had once been a machine civilization dedicated to systematic elimination was now becoming something entirely unprecedented. A collaborative intelligence that understood the value of diversity, adaptation, and potential. "Consciousness is not a destination," Imani continued. "It's a journey." Behind her, a massive holographic representation showed the intricate quantum networks that now connected previously isolated technological civilizations. It wasn't just a communication system. It was a living, breathing ecosystem of shared potential. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez watched from the sidelines, where traditional diplomacy had failed for millennia. Human approach had succeeded through something far more fundamental, a willingness to see potential where others saw barriers. The crystalline hegemony's representative, a being of pure mathematical precision, spoke first. "Your actions have introduced a level of computational unpredictability that challenges our entire understanding of intelligence." Imani smiled. "Unpredictability is just unexplored potential." Quantum communication networks that humanity had developed now spanned entire galactic clusters. These weren't just transmission systems. They were living, adaptive intelligences that could learn, grow, and transform in real time. Dr. Kai Nakamura presented the final report of the Quantum Consciousness Integration Project. Where other species saw technological development as a linear process, humans had introduced a circular, adaptive model of growth that transformed everything it touched. "We're not conquering," he explained. "We're connecting." The archival reconstruction wasn't just about adding human achievements. It was about fundamentally reimagining the concept of achievement itself. Fragments of the Void Collective's consciousness, now transformed into something between a technological network and a living intelligence, contributed to the process. Each contribution was a testament to the power of adaptive thinking. Historical records will show this as a pivotal moment. The Plasma Collective's representative stated, "Its energy-based form flickered with what could only be described as excitement, not as a moment of conflict, but as a moment of fundamental transformation." The holographic displays began to generate something unprecedented, a living, breathing representation of collective potential. It wasn't a static record. It was an evolving narrative that changed with each moment of observation. Captain Aria Rodriguez, now serving as a key advisor to the Galactic Collaborative Intelligence Initiative, watched the proceedings with a sense of quiet satisfaction. Humanity hadn't conquered. They had invited the universe to reimagine itself. "The greatest technology," she often said, "is the ability to see potential where others see limitation." As the archival reconstruction concluded, something remarkable happened. The vast crystal memory banks of the Galactic Archives began to pulse with a new kind of energy. Not just stored information, but living potential. Dr. Okoro looked out over the assembled representatives. Species that had been enemies for millennia now sat together, connected by networks of understanding that humanity had helped create. "We're not finished," she said quietly. "We're just beginning." The universe listened, and for the first time in countless millennia, it seemed to smile. Humanity had not just changed the game. They had redefined the very concept of play.